All right. Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Iowa Learning Farms Conservation Webinar. I'm Matt Helmers with Iowa State University and glad to be here hosting today. Um, Thanks everybody for taking time out of your busy schedule for attending. We might have some people that aren't on today that normally would be because the Iowa State game is going on right now, or some people that might even be following the score on a electronic device. But thank you all for coming and taking the time to listen to a webinar today. So today we have with us Dr. Humberto Blanco, that's with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, professor of soil management and applied soil physics. He's going to be talking to us today about conservation tillage effects on soil health and soil carbon. So I think a super important topic and one I get asked a lot about. So I'm really looking forward to this presentation. So Humberto, this virtual floor is all yours. As always, folks, if you have questions or comments, please type in the chat box and we will get to our speaker at the end of the talk. So, okay, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you all for having me today. This is a very exciting opportunity for me to share uh, a little bit of what I know in 25 minutes, right? So uh, my appointment is 60% research and 40% teaching. So I don't have an extension appointment, but I always enjoy this type of opportunities to share some of my research findings. When heard from Elena saying, "Well, can you talk about conservation tillage or something related to that?" I got excited because we should be talking about conservation tillage, I would say, every day. I mean, this is a part of our existence, our lives. I mean, so I'm gonna uh, get more into that, but especially when you have this fluctuations in terms of weather. Like it was 85 a couple of days ago here in Lincoln, and this morning I saw some snowflakes, and I got excited. Said, "Oh, it's going to snow more." Or, well, now it's sunny again. I grew up in the mountains or in the Andes, and then I like snow. So, but anyways, we see some fluctuations and sometimes severe, right? And then we need to be talking about conservation. So it's a great opportunity. And I also like the format of the webinar. Thanks, Matt, Elena, and others who organized this um, event. I mean, it's 25 minutes and the rest for questions, because that gives me a chance to try to answer some of the questions you may have. Because in my case, I can start preaching or rambling, for 1 hour, and then without, focusing much on the story. So that's going to be great. My talk is going to be a kind of an overview. I won't be focusing like on data from one or two sites. I would like to provide a little bit of an overview, but if you have some specific questions, we can get to those later. When Alena said, "Do you have any photos for the webinar?" I said, "Well, I have, several photos," but then I found this was on top of the list. Photo from Sydney, Nebraska, in western Nebraska, right? I said, "Do we have to plow these soils? Look at my experiment there. Isn't this in there?" And the collaborator said, "We need to plow this field, Humberto. So we're going to be careful with your experiment. We're going to go around your plots." Look at that. It's not very dry. Why do we have to plow? And sometimes we have to, but a lot of times we might not have to plow, right? Conservation tillage is the basis, right? This is just a reminder. What is conservation tillage? I mean, no-till obviously is there, reduced tillage and crop residues, right? They go together. But now we're talking about conservation ag. And what's that? It rests on conservation tillage, right? Again, it's reduced tillage, crop residues, plus living cover, cover crops and perennials. Then we're talking about principles of soil health, right? We do have, right, many practices there, but one of the key practices is what? Is again, tillage, minimizing tillage. So that's the basis. It doesn't matter if we diversify our systems, if we put cover crops, if we add residues, if we are going to destroy with the plow, right? That's what I'm saying, that tillage is the main ingredient to make the other practices work. And then also this is related to what we're talking about recently, right? The regenerative ag, that how can we regenerate soils and all that stuff, right? Okay, so I'm here to talk about how does conservation tillage affect soil properties, right? Okay, well, we can spend here, weeks, maybe in a semester talking about all these, but I'm going to be focusing on some of the key parameters here. If we want to evaluate health, if we want to know how healthy a soil is, we really need to run some tests, right? Like we do with humans, right? I mean, here you go. Here is your glucose level. Here is your cholesterol level. Okay, in the case of soils, we have physical, chemical, biological properties which determine how healthy the soil is. And we have on the left, that's probably it's my alley, right? Because I teach soil physics and talk about soil management. So we measure these physical properties, and we have been integrating a bit with other, properties like organic matter, organic carbon. Obviously, biological properties are key component. Okay, the first question is this: does no-till accumulate carbon? Why carbon? Because that's probably one of the key properties that you know uh, determines soil health, right? It's correlated to a number of soil health parameters. So, but does no-till accumulate carbon? This is what we know from research, right? This is what research says. Near the surface, that's in the upper 3-4 inches, yes, no-till accumulates or stores more carbon than tilled soils in most cases. But what about at the bottom of the plow layer? Sometimes no-till has less carbon than tilled systems. Now, if we look at the whole profile, no-till, and then no-till and till systems for the whole profile, let's say, 1 meter or even beyond that. Sometimes, most of the time, we don't see any differences. Okay, so I don't think no-till is storing carbon more than till systems for the whole profile. But yes, it can accumulate carbon near the surface. Is the shallow carbon relevant? Yes, it's relevant because it determines other soil health parameters. But if we want to talk about carbon sequestration, which is a different topic, we need to be careful, right? So it's highly site specific. In some cases, we may see that no-till is storing down to 10, 20 inches below the surface, right? But in most cases, this is what we know. But it would be nice to identify spots, right? And that's what a lot of time we tend to generalize. Say, well, we need to transition to no-till, and then everybody will be happy. Well, not really, because performance of no-till depends on a lot of factors, right? I mean, on climate. Like I worked in Western in Kansas for many years when I was at K-State, and with that no-till outperforms plow-till in terms of yield, and it can improve, soil carbon, right? And what about in low carbon soils? Again, in semi-arid regions, probably we don't have a lot of carbon. So if we are successful with production there, we can, accumulate carbon. And also depends on, how long have you been using no-till? 20 years, 50 years? Well, that's going to take a while, right? I don't think we're going to see any benefits in the first 5 years. It usually takes at least 5 years for no-till to affect soil properties. Maybe sloping soils is the target, because we know that, right? I mean, flat soils, highly productive, fertile soils might not benefit from no-till as much as sloping soils. And depends on the cropping systems too, right? Right. So what fields should be, should benefit from no-till the most? Maybe low carbon, sloping, eroded, right? And medium textured soils. Especially if they have low carbon, as long as we produce enough biomass, right? Okay, let's talk about physical properties. What does research say about this? Okay, I borrowed these slides from the extension office in the University of Minnesota. But you may have seen this. Look at when it comes to temperature. Yeah, it's usually cooler, right? In the springtime on the temperature in the no-till, right? And then what about vertical till? A little bit warmer, right? Chisel plow, warmer, right? So soils are going to be a bit warmer in there. Even in the strip till. So the tillage definitely affects, right? So no-till soils are going to tend to be cooler, right? What about in terms of water content? Yeah, no-till um, usually has higher water content, right? And then chisel plow, obviously, removes residue or mixes residues, then we don't have a lot of probably water content, or we have less water content than no-till, right? Okay, in terms of water, loss, we lose a lot of water with moldwork plow. The moldwork plow probably is not common practice anymore, but chisel plow, right? I mean, chisel plow is gonna disturb the soil, obviously, probably not as much as moldwork plow, but it will cause water losses relative to no-till. Okay, so what are physical properties? This is probably again in my area. This is from my own research and literature review on a global and regional scales. This is what we know so far. Bulk density, penetration resistance, we measure often those to assess soil compaction, right? Or porosity when it comes to bulk density. And we know compared to conventional till, no-till, yeah, can increase bulk density and penetration resistance in some cases or have no effect. Okay, what about aggregate stability, the soil structure? It seems that's one of the most responsive soil properties, and that usually it's increased with no-till in most studies. Water infiltration, the same thing. I mean, it tends to increase in most cases. Water holding capacity in a plant available water, that's the difference between water content at field capacity and permanent wilting point. It can increase, may or may not increase, right? And the temperature, as I mentioned earlier, right? No-till systems can have lower soil temperature in the spring, right? And what about in summer? In summer, sometimes it's cooler, which is good. That will reduce evaporation, right? Especially in water limited regions. So what's the conclusion from this? No-till generally improves physical properties, especially near the surface when compared to till systems in general. What about now compared to reduced till? Because I mean, some of us, right, in our experiments, like farmers, I mean, use reduced till, right, strip till, or maybe vertical till in some cases. Well, how is it? What does research say about that? Here you go. So for a few parameters, we don't have like tons of study comparing, strip till and vertical till and against no-till, but the available studies show this. Bulk density, it seems that there is not much difference between no-till and reduced till. Same thing with penetration resistance, it's kind of mixed. What about with aggregate stability? I mean, again, strip till can reduce, right, or have no effects, similar with water infiltration. So in summary, it seems, yeah, reduced till could be similar to no-till, and then sometimes it's similar to till, but definitely is in between no-till and conventional till, right? But I've seen in some of our experiments that no-till, I mean, reduced till is no different from no-till in some cases. I'm talking about like disking, and then strip tillage. Okay. Okay, now I would like to chat a bit about the challenges. I mean, no-till, it's a great system. I mean, we know that, right? I'm not going to preach about this lecture or anything about the benefits of no-till. We know that it was invented to reduce erosion, right? After the Dust Bowl, and it conserves water in some area regions, that improves soil, near surface soil properties, I mentioned, and crop yields in water limited regions, right? It reduces labor. Okay, so there are a lot of benefits there, right? But there are some site-specific challenges. I've seen them again here in Nebraska and Kansas. I've seen some. I had some plots, but no-till plots and research plots that we couldn't control. Kochia, we had some herbicide-resistant weeds, right? In some plots, no-till plots, and in some cases there's nutrient stratification because, as I said, carbon is no-till usually accumulates carbon near the surface. Maybe some acidification, compaction in some cases, right? And in some sort, a little bit too much tillage, maybe. I mean, too much residues. Here I put here a question mark. Too much residues. Okay, so let's chat about this. This is again a reminder. Simply just switching to no-till may not be enough, right? To improve, soil health and all the services. I don't think it's enough in most cases. This is what we have been doing, right? A lot of farmers are doing this. And yeah, converting from plow-till from the old days into no-till is the first step. What's another step? Okay, we need to manage residues, right? In some cases, in irrigated systems, for example, we do have, a little bit too much residue. Does it mean that we have to burn or remove everything? No. We can share some with livestock, but we need to share some with the soil too, right? And then we have just like cover crops. I mean, that's what we did. We had several experiments here in Nebraska where we baled residues and then we planted winter rye with an airplane. You see, this is one of the experiments in central Nebraska. But okay, we're going to bale and then plant residues, a randomized experiment in farmers field, all that stuff. So you see, the cereal rye kind of providing a cover there after the residue was baled. And then what about other practices? Right? I mean, it's not only this. I mean, we know what residues are important. We know what about others, right? Okay, so again, especially here in irrigated systems in Nebraska, oh, we have too much residue. They'll bring diseases. We need to probably remove. Well, I think we need to make our residue work. They mimic nature, right? I mean, they trap snow. They took a photo here in Western Kansas many years ago. Look at that. The morning after snow, residues will trap snow, water, right? But if we didn't have any residues, then we lose water quickly, right? So I think we need to work with residues. I mean, so here you go. If you have a little bit too much residue in some cases, there are so many options there, right? What about baling, right? I mean, we can say how much? Do not bale more than 50%, please. 50%. So we need to leave residue, right? Like 2 or 3 tons to protect the soil. What about grazing? And we have been doing experiments on that. Does grazing residues and cover crops degrade soils? And cover crops is part of the system. But in short, not really, right? Or adjusting. I'm not, an expert in farm machinery or anything, but what about changing? I've been working with some colleagues who say, well, we need to change this, the equipment, the way that it's set up, right? And living residues standing so it can capture snow and intercept wind and right. But we have some other tools maybe even in the worst case scenario, But this is kind of disturbing the soil a bit. What about vertical tillage, strip tillage? Oh, what about the strategic tillage? We're gonna talk about that a bit more later. I've been talking to researchers and some of them say, if you have a lot of residues, please add cover crops. And that will take care of. And we have seen in some cases, because cover crops will add humidity to soil, right? That will add live organic matter, and that can expedite or promote microbial activity. And then that probably don't have to worry about too much residues, right? So threshold level, the minimum level, right? Important to keep in mind. How much do we need? How much residue do we need? Well, depends on the parameter, but on average for organic matter, about 3 tons. This is just an estimate, 3 tons per acre. What about physical properties? Maybe 2 to 3. Biology, soil health. I put a question mark there. I mean, soil health is, it's that's a huge phrase, right? I mean, I would say maybe about 3 tons per acre, right? So if we have extra, let's say we have 6 tons per acre, some of that may be available for other uses, right? For livestock or for biofuel in some cases, right? Okay, something I want to touch again, conservation tillage is the topic, but we cannot separate from others, as I said, right? Conservation tillage is just a screwdriver. It's a tool, right? Another tool, cover crops, right? Cover crops, I'm pretty sure you guys heard a lot of talk, or planted cover crops, but something that I would like to share, I mean, it might be beneficial for some, is that what we found in a lot of our plots is this. If we are not going to produce more than 1 ton per acre of residue, right, with cover crops, I don't think we're going to see a lot of benefits when it comes to soils. What about cropping systems? I mean, continuous corn in some cases. We have a lot of residue. But then we have been playing with the cereal rye. Cereal rye leaves then less than 1 ton. But continuous corn, what? Leaves like maybe 7, 8 tons, or sometimes 10 tons. I'm thinking megagrams, maybe 10 megagrams, maybe 5 tons per acre of residue. So compared to what we get from a rye, it's, right? So it's rye would provide very little amount, right? And also depends on the growing window. Sometimes we terminate a bit early. Really, we need to do more work on planting green, right? Although that can affect, nutrient immobilization and other things. We have done some work on that. And duration. I don't think, again, we're going to see any benefits when it comes to soils in the first few years. Maybe with weeds, yes, they'll control weeds, but what soil properties tend to respond slower. And then initial carbon, right? Initial carbon. Soils with less than 1% carbon, that's about maybe like 2%, right? Of organic matter probably can benefit more. And silt loam soils and eroded, obviously. Maybe grasses, they produce a lot of biomass, can be more beneficial than legumes, right? Okay, but I've seen some no-till fields like this, especially here in semi-arid regions. I mean, there's no-till. I took this photo in Hays, Kansas. Look at that. That's no-till. That's not no-till. That soil is being cooked. What about here in eastern Nebraska? I took a photo last year, I think. And the soil is bleeding, right? I mean, it's no-till, but I mean, it has to be like this, right? With a lot of residue. And the one on the right, corn silage. I mean, we remove some of those residues, and then the soil is naked, okay? No, we need to protect the soil. I mean, what about adding cover crops to the systems, right? So we need to add cover crops, and that can provide some cover and protect from erosion and then improve soil properties, right? Just an example here from cover crops. I had a nice experiment here with Mark Clausen. I have to give him the credit. He retired from K-State many years ago. But yeah, when I joined K-State in 2005, I think it was 6, and then he had a very nice experiment here near Wichita. The system was what? This no-till wheat sorghum with summer cover crops. He had this for 15 years. And I said, well, let's look at some soil properties. So here we had sun hemp, right? There's a summer cover crop, and then off-season soybean, and compared with no cover crop. And in terms of organic carbon, look at that. Yes, this is no-till alone on the left. No-till alone, business as usual. If you add cover crops, then look at the delta. You're increasing by in 15 years, we increased by 0.45% carbon. And that's about 1% organic matter. So we're increasing 1% of organic matter in 10 years, or over 10 years, actually, right? Something to remember. But look at the amount of biomass production, 3 tons for some hemp, 2, that's what I'm saying. If you are getting less than 1, probably we're not going to see a lot of benefits. Something that I wanted to touch is this. I've been giving talks recently about occasional tillage. There's a couple of slides here. I mean, should we disturb our no-till soils? That's a sacrilege. That's what some may say. Is it sacrilege? Well, it's a tillage in 5 or 10 years, okay? Does this erase all the benefits of no-till? Sometimes we need that one-time operation. We need that surgery. That minor surgery to incorporate biochar, to incorporate manure, to incorporate lime, okay? But are we going to undo all the great benefits, the soil benefits especially, right? This is summary of literature, what we know so far. Look at that. In terms of penetration resistance, compaction, yes, it can alleviate. That means green it's positive, so it alleviates. In terms of bulk density, a bit mixed. Okay, runoff, it can increase in some cases, but not always. Erosion is going to cause a lot of erosion, not really. What about dissolved P? Because we're going to invert the soil with occasional tillage. It seems it's helping, right? It seems in most cases it can reduce the P concentration near the surface. Aggregate stability, kind of mixed there. Soil water, we're not going to lose a lot. No effect. The yellow is no effect. And then soil carbon, are you going to burn or just all the carbon? No, no effect in most cases. pH, it's a no effect. What about yield? This yield is kind of mixed, right? Or before that, the weed density. Yes, usually controls weeds, right? Okay, but the challenge is this. There are a lot of factors that affect the occasional tillage performance. How long do the benefits last? What I've seen, what from research is like 2 years, maybe 3 years. If there are any negative effects, also last 2, 3 years. How often should I do it? I mean, I would base the research data. It should be once in 5 years or 10 years, right? Yeah, and depends on the tool. If you want to really invert the soil and move the high carbon layer and then bring the low carbon layer up, then you need to use more of a plow, right? Because if you're using disc, you're just mixing it, right? So it depends the objective of the occasional tillage. But obviously, we shouldn't be using occasional tillage in sloping soils or low carbon soils and things like that, right? Do we really need occasional tillage? I don't think so. First, we need to exhaust all other alternatives, right? What about if you have too much residue, maybe removing some? What about using a strip till instead? Control traffic, cover crops, right? What about stacking this, right? I mean, not only one practice. I mean, we need different tools, right, to fix a problem. So, in conclusion, no-till, yeah, improves soil properties, but that's most of the time near the surface. I think we need to, add cover crops if we haven't added yet, cover crops and other practices, whatever, like prairie strips, and other systems there to make no-till work better. Sometimes a strip till could be an alternative to no-till, right? Could be if there is still some issues with no-till. But occasional tillage is the last option, is the last resort, right? But again, each field is different. I mean, each problem needs different treatment. And so we really need to think in terms um, of the problem in a site-specific basis. Each problem is based on a context and it depends on the farm, and no two farms are the same, right? So again, I would emphasize the site specificity. It's like treating there are two people. Should they take the same, types of pill or the same number of pills? No, right? Each person is different, and this is the same thing with soil, right? This is our reminder. I think that's all what we had, and here is my contact if you wanna chat more about soils.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Blanco. And let's go to the last some logistical slides there. And please get your questions in. Type those in the chat box. We have some that are in there, but should have time for plenty of them. So if you want to advance the slide, hopefully there with Elena's. Okay. Oh, maybe one more slide.
One more?
Okay, yeah, there we go. Want to acknowledge the important partners that make the Iowa Learning Farms webinar series possible: the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, the Iowa DNR, Iowa Nutrient Research Center, and the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture. These wouldn't be possible without those partners. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, if you watch this webinar live and are wanting to earn a CCA CEU, please email Elena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today. Include your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number. Again, ALENAW at iastate.edu. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, if you watch this webinar live and are willing to fill out a voluntary demographic survey, we'd greatly appreciate it. Only one survey response is needed for all 2026 webinars. So if you've done so, thank you very much. If you're willing to do that, we'd greatly appreciate it. You can scan that QR code or go to iowalearningfarms.org/survey. Next slide. Ah, next week, okay, we're going to talk about cover crops again, but we're going to talk about cover crops for weed control, the good, the bad, and the ugly with Dr. Debulin Sagrungi from University of Minnesota. So please tune in. I think a good time for this as we think about cover crop management this spring. So please tune in next week for that. Let's go to the next slide. This webinar and all other webinars are archived, and you can find those on the Iowa Learning Farms site or on the Learning Farms webinars YouTube channel. And I think that should be the end of the slides, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, nope, 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 nope. Tune in tomorrow. Okay, another important cover crop topic, evaluating manure application and cover crop planning to maximize water quality benefits in corn. We have Dr. Dan Anderson, Dr. Raj Raman, and Philip Roxon with us. So please tune in tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So note the time difference from our webinars that the virtual field day at 1 tomorrow. Get all your manure and cover crop questions up and ready for Dan. Okay, now I think that's the end of the slide. So let's start with first question here is, do you see, or question is, how much of the challenges of no-till do you think are due to kind of the predominant corn-soybean rotation?
And under current soybean systems, I don't think they have a lot of challenges with no-till. Since we have, I've been doing work on irrigated corn and then on continuous corn in some cases. We do have like a little bit of, large amount of residues. But under corn soybean systems, probably the challenges are, not as much as under continuous corn. That's what I would say. Maybe the challenge there is maybe we don't have enough residue in some cases after soybean, right? Then we need to add cover crops. And what I've seen in some of our experiments is cover crops usually provide more benefits under corn soybean than under continuous corn because, again, as I said, we have a large amount of residue under continuous corn, right?
So this one, you might not be as related to Iowa, but I think we can think about this in general. How has adoption of no-till gone over the years, and have we hit a plateau in adoption of cover crops? And maybe what might you suggest to, if so, what might you suggest to overcome that plateau?
Excellent question. Wow, that's a good one. Yeah. Yes, I would say for when it comes to no-till, yeah, probably we're about to hit, if not, we have hit, the plateau. I mean, what I've seen from literature is in some, there are statistics from other countries, right? In Brazil, in Argentina, 80%, 90% for no-till adoption. But I wonder, what about in the States? Why is like only 20% or 30%? It depends on the crop, right? Maybe after soybean is going to be like, 50, 60%, if not more than that. So, yeah, that's a concern. That's why some producers, have considered maybe a few of them about occasional tillage, right? Okay, so that because there are some concerns there, right? Does it always increase yields? That was been asked, compared to plowed soil, tilled soil, does it always increase yield? Well, in some cases it does, but in some cases probably it conserves our soils, right? Protects our soil. So if we do the total budget analysis, still no till is a win-win scenario. Because we're reducing labor and we're reducing fuel use and things like that, right? So, but in terms of bushels per acre, it may not differ from plowed soils in some cases. And the same thing with cover crops. I think that was related to that. Yes. We need to know our goal. What's the goal of adding cover crops, right? I've worked with farmers. We have some on-farm experiments. And I added cover crops. Well, organic matter content hasn't increased. And some say, well, it increased. Well, it depends. Probably in your case, you have livestock, so you need to plant cover crops for livestock.
Yeah.
That's the benefit, immediate benefit. What about weeds? I mean, so and that's an immediate benefit as long as you get some decent amount of biomass production, more than 1 ton per acre, and then that's going to reduce weeds. But when it comes to like soil organic matter, especially physical properties, it's going to take a while. You won't see immediate benefit. But if you want to see it in terms of economics again, grazing or haying or right? And then wheat management could be immediate benefits. What about nitrate leaching? I mean, we have done some work, I mean, with winter rye and sandy soils
Yeah.
and with NRDs. And then we have seen some benefits. I mean, it fluctuates from year to year. Sometimes we don't get a lot of biomass. Again, it goes back to that, but when rye produces, a significant amount of biomass, then we see some decrease in and nitrate leaching in some of our sandy soils.
Great. Okay. The next one is why would no-till cause increased acidification and loss of soluble nutrients? Is it just from increased water infiltration?
Very good. Acidification. Now, what we have seen is in some of our long-term experiments, I'm thinking about fertilization, nitrogen application here. We have a couple of long-term experiments, and then we measure pH, and then the nitrogen application usually reduces pH. We had, in terms of like metric units, we had 160 kg per hectare, and then that definitely reduced. I mean, that's not even, I mean, we're using probably 250 kg per hectare, right? But 160, we have an experiment, long-term experiment, and the maximum rate was 160 kg per hectare. That reduced pH, especially in no-till soils. So what about we have moldwort plow in that experiment? We have the disc and chisel plow, and the decrease in pH in tilled soils was less, but it was
Okay.
more in tilled soil. Just an example off the top of my head. The zero in application was about like 6.5 or 6. Okay, so that's not bad. But the pH on the no-till was 4.5. After how many
Okay.
years? After 35 years.
Okay.
And then on their plowed soils, I mean, chisel plowed soils was like 5.5. It also decreased, but not as much in no-till. So that's just an example.
Okay.
So,
The next one, I think you mentioned the experiment in Nebraska, taking the residue off and flying on the cover crop. What do you think is the most beneficial for the soil? Residue that breaks down over the next season, or cover crops with that, above ground and the root system?
very good. That's yeah. So residues, I mean, after left after corn harvest or so, they'll just sit on top of the soil surface. And otherwise, especially in windy regions like
Ah,
around
yeah.
here, I mean, those residues tend to move from one plot to another, or from field to another. So definitely, moving that, removing some of that surface material, and then putting cover crops definitely will be better, because we are adding living roots, right? We are adding living roots, and you might be grazing. I mean, I've seen, farmers that's okay. I'm going to fly cover crop this fall and then graze in the spring. That's great. I mean, we are not going to graze corn, I mean, cover crop residues. I mean, sorry, roots, right? You are leaving
Yeah.
roots behind. So that's still a win-win scenario. And besides, you're not going to clear probably the soil surface. I mean, all the cover crops from the surface. So yeah, definitely, as long as we get a good stand, that will help. And then we have characterized root biomass production in those systems. And definitely there's addition of root biomass, right, to corn systems. So.
Okay. All right. Um, there was maybe last one, unless anybody else types in, is with good water infiltration, is there any problem in no-till with nutrient stratification?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we have seen if no-till improves, I mean, water infiltration. then I don't think we're going to see a lot of issues with stratification. So that
Okay.
depends on the soil, though, right?
Okay.
I mean, medium texture soils, I mean, right, probably respond better. But what about some clay soils? We do have some experiments here in Celtic clay loam. And definitely stratification there. And then water infiltration, in some cases, we have a long-term experiment here in eastern Nebraska. I mean, no-till had lower water infiltration than plowed soil 1 year after plowing. Obviously,
Okay.
immediately after plowing, of course, plowed soil will have higher water infiltration, but
Yeah.
this was 1 year after.
Okay.
How come? So, well, that's one of 10 maybe, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, in some cases, right? So, yeah, in well-drained no-till soils, probably stratification of P, carbon, it won't be as pronounced as in clay soils. So, I
Okay.
mean, poorly drained soils. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Blanco. That was really informative and important. I'd encourage folks to consider tuning in tomorrow for our virtual field day, as well as next week. Dr. Blanco mentioned about kind of biomass and what you might need for some of the soil health benefits, but I think it's also important as we think about weeds. So that one's going to be next week, next Wednesday. So tune in next week. I know some people, at least around here, might be on spring break, but we'll be here with the webinar. So please tune in next week. Again, if you need a CCA CEU, email Elena Whitaker at iastate.edu, and her email is alenaw@iastate.edu. With that, I greatly appreciate everybody tuning in to the webinar today, and I hope you all have a great rest of the week.